This is April 18, 2005. We are interviewing John Jacobs, a United States Marine Corps rifleman who is a former prisoner of war during the Korean War. He served in the United States Marine Corps from April 1951 until June 1954. This interview is being conducted by June and Kenneth Hunter at the Stratton VA Medical Facility in Albany, New York. Please tell us your full name and when and where you were born.
John A. Jacobs, Jr. I was born in Amsterdam, New York, St. Mary's Hospital.
And when were you born?
In 1932, July 3rd, 1932.
What did you do before you entered the Marine Corps?
Well, I went through high school and then I went to work for General Electric Company. I worked there approximately 6 months, maybe a little longer. And one day a friend of mine, childhood friend of mine, was working there too. And he come to me and he says, how do you like your job, John? And I said, I don't like it. I said, which 18-year-old likes their job? Not too many. So he said, well, let's join the Marines. We had a lot of friends that were in the Marine Corps, and at that particular time, if we didn't join, we'd have probably got drafted. So we were going to go into where we wanted to go. So we took the next day off and went down to Albany recruiting office and joined the Marines. And they give us 2 weeks in order to report for active duty. So the next day I went back to work and my foreman told me the superintendent would like to see me. Right away I thought I was going to get in trouble for taking the previous day off. But lo and behold, he offered me the apprentice course that he used to run. And I told him, I says, well, I have to go into the service. And he related to me that anyone going on the apprentice course and did good would get a 4-year deferral. They wouldn't have to go. And I told him that I joined yesterday. And he informed me that it was too late. I'd have to go. So I was a day late and $1 short there.
Okay, now then where did you go once you reported?
Well, once I reported to the Marines, we went to Parris Island, the great boot camp. And after going through the training on Parris Island, I think we got a week leave home. And then I had to report to Camp Pendleton in California for advanced infantry training. And that took about 2 months. And after completing our advanced infantry training, we boarded ships to go overseas. Now this was the 13th draft, because every month they had a draft, and I happened to be on the 13th draft. So we went overseas and we got put in our respective outfits. And I was assigned to E25, 1st Marine Division FMF. And we were, our outfit, well, the reason why we were assigned to that is because of people that were getting rotated and people that got wounded in on the front. We were in the north part of Korea where the big hills were, and I'd spend maybe 7-8 months on these hills. We'd go from hill to hill and we'd go in on patrols to seek out the enemy, and we'd get in a skirmish with them every once in a while. So, but I spent about eight months there. after the period of 8 months, then we got shifted onto a different line and we went to a position 40 miles from Seoul on the front line. And I just gotten there and we'd been put on a listening post. And a listening post is a post where you're on a platoon outpost, and this is in the front of the lines, and then the outpost puts out listening posts around that in order to warn them if the enemy's coming. And if the enemy comes, you're supposed to try to delay there for about 5-10 minutes and then retreat back to that, go back to the listening or the outpost. And then our artillery is zeroed in on where we were, so it starts coming in. So we were on that listening post and there was nothing there. And we got over there and we started digging holes or foxholes. You can only dig about 2 foot down and then you hit solid rock. So you couldn't make too much of a hole, 2-3 foot. You couldn't make much of a hole. So one day the captain of our company came up on the front. I told him, I said, hey, we need sandbags here so we can fill up and make a position. So he said that they didn't have any sandbags. And he said this is a relatively safe position because he pointed out that in front of us there was a barbed wire line and on the other side of that barbed wire was the General Van Fleet zone. Now the General Van Fleet zone circled the Moon Jong. The Moon Jong is where the peace talks were being held for the last 2-3 years, and there was supposed to be no enemy fire or no fire at all from us or the enemy, and no troops through that or anything else. So he says that you have a relatively easy position here because the enemy weren't supposed to come through there. So, but we didn't feel too good about it anyway, so he left, and there was a lot of rock there, so we built a rock fort light out of rocks. And as I was building this fort, I smashed my finger. Matter of fact, it's my trigger finger. I smashed my finger, so I went down to the outpost, the platoon outpost, and see the corpsman, and he bandaged it up. And he asked me if I wanted a Purple Heart for it. And I said no, because he would have sent me back to the rear, but I said no. I'd had to go back up to the outpost, the listening post, and go and over the hills. And if I'd have come back, it would have come back at dawn, at evening, and that's when you get picked off by the enemy snipers. So I said no, I'll stay up there because I understand tomorrow we're all leaving this hill. Because my squad leader came up and told me that. Matter of fact, he was from Buffalo, New York, and he said that him and I were going home the next day. But that evening, about 1 o'clock, the enemy come through that neutral zone and attacked at our listening post. And from what I understand, there was about 400 of them. And there was, at that particular time, there was 5 of us. And one of my men got killed, and the other one got severely wounded, and he was in the hospital for almost 2-3 years, and he's paralyzed right now. And I got captured. And incidentally, being the captain said it was relatively safe duty there. And when I went to sleep at night, I used to take my boots off, because you don't do that on the front. keep your boots on, ready to go. But this was easy post, so I took my boots off. And when they hit, I ran out of my lean-to or whatever it was, and went to where my gun emplacement was, and didn't really make it. I ran toward the front, and the enemy was coming towards me, and it was a wall of them, and it was pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face, so I jumped in this little hole that we'd started, and they ran right over the top of me. Well, what happens is at times they attacked, and they generally leave your position before daylight. I think this was a harassing kind of an attack they were pulling off there. So my fire team leader, he got hit, and he laid there wounded, and the other two men tried to take him, get him out of there, but he didn't want to. He said that, I heard him, I couldn't see any of this, but I could hear it, that if they tried to get, take him with them, they wouldn't make it themselves. So they traded rifles with him, because one was full and the other was empty, and he laid there. And they fired the rest of their ammunition, and they hollered for me. Well, I couldn't say nothing because I was surrounded by the enemy, and so the last thing I heard from them was the one said to the other guy, said, "How much ammunition you got left?" And the guy says, "I got just what's in my rifle and one grenade." And so they said, "Well, we'll have to fire that and get out of here. Give me one more yell," and they left. So those two got off of there. And the one who was on a position that I was headed for, he got killed on that position. And of course the guy that got hit, and they left him there, the enemy come up and they put 20, 30 brick gun slugs right in his stomach and left him for dead. Although he wasn't dead. The next morning our side come over and pulled him off that hill. Of course, he spent the next two years or better in the hospital, and he was paralyzed. So, and he come from Oatskinskill, New York. It's not too far from where we are right now, Albany VA hospital. So I'm laying there saying my prayers, and they set up a machine gun right over that hole, and they had an E mortar, and they were shooting at our outpost, to an outpost, and eventually the clouds parted a little bit and the moon come out, and it shined down that hole, and they seen me. So by this time I have no more ammunition left, and all out of grenades. I threw them all. So they were going to grab me. Well, one of the enemy, he pulled out a grenade and he started to throw it down in on me, and another one hollered. I don't know what they said because I don't speak to it. He threw the grenade over the hill and they grabbed me out of there. And from what I understand is that they wanted to take a prisoner, because like I say, we were just got there about 3-4 weeks before that, and they thought that we were planning something, and they wanted to know. But my friend, I don't know why they didn't take him as a prisoner, but he was already wounded, so they wanted to make sure he was dead when they shot him with the rip gun. So they grabbed me out of there, and I got up out of that hole, and all of a sudden our incoming come in, because it's all zeroed in anyway, and that's the way it's supposed to work. And the shrapnel got a bunch of those, knocked them down, and they were all around me, and I did get a little shrapnel. I got hit too. But they grabbed me, and down over the side of the hill we went. Well, I got down over the side of the hill, and my feet start killing me, and I was wondering what the heck was happening. I got hit in the upper back. How come my feet's killing me? Well, I looked down, I got no shoes on. Now I remembered, I went to, in my sack without the shoes, because it was easy duty there. So, I sat down there and I said, I ain't going any further, because they don't understand English, and they're pointing their rifle at me, trying to get me to go, and I pointed down to my feet. I said, I got no shoes, and I ain't going any further. Do what you gotta do. I give them the best motions I could. Geez, lo and behold, about 4 or 5 minutes later, along comes one of them guys and threw down a pair of boots, and they were my boots. He got them out of the wiki where we were staying, so I threw them down, put them on, so I put the boots on and grabbed me, and away we went. And we went down, right down through the neutral zone, through Moon Jong, where there was a light that shined up in the air, and as soon as they hit, that light went out. But after they made their initial attack, and this time when I was going through there, they were leading me through, the light came back on. They must have put it back on. Well, I see rows and rows of dead enemy. They had them piled up like cordwood. So our artillery fire must have gotten a lot of them. Now, I never seen so many dead people, but apparently they take all their dead off the field, so they don't want to give us the feeling that we did, you know, we killed a lot of them. I mean, in different areas, after an attack, we'd go down there and there'd be no bodies like this. Of course, that's what they were doing there. They were piling them all up, and eventually they would come and take them away. And there was a good many of them. I was very surprised how many there was. That's why I kind of remember this. So they took me through there, and they brought me to a bunker on their side. And I sat in there. And after a fast time went by, it was time to eat. So they would feed me, so I got what they eat, fish heads and rice. Well, there's no way that I was going to eat fish heads, so I didn't eat. As a matter of fact, I didn't eat for 3 or 4 days anyway, because I couldn't eat their kind of food. But after that, I generally got used to it, and I started eating. Of course, after they got me off the front line and I got toward the rear more, they didn't have fish heads anymore, so their diets were peanuts and rice or turnips and stuff like that. They had a lot of that. Of course, you didn't get that much, but so from there, I had to walk to the rear of their lines. And a couple days later, there was 4 other fellas, Marines, that got captured on that hill, on the outpost. And they were a machine gun nest. And 4 of those, they got captured, and they put them in with me. So now I made a total of 5 of us. And one of those guys in particular, his name was Custage, and he was from Yugoslavia, and he joined the Marines to acquire his citizenship papers. And this guy was in pretty good shape. A couple of the guys were wounded, and not bad, but bad enough. So as they walked us back, this guy Custage, he'd keep right up with him, and we had a couple guys that, one of them got wounded in the eye and the other one got wounded in the leg. And they could only go slow. But the enemy was back there with their rifles and urging them on, punching them with their rifles to go, keep up. Very nice to holler at this Custage to slow down. Well, he says that he was in as good a shape as the enemy was. He's going to show how good a shape he was in. I says, if you're not helping us, these guys can't make it, you know. But he was pretty hard-headed. So that's when I first run into him, and I pretty much got a hard time from him for quite some time. So from there we went back to the rear. We got questioned every now and again, and I remember one time we were questioned by the enemy, and we were in this on the side hill in this coop or whatever, and they were taking us out one at a time to question us. Well, I was going down the hill where they were questioning. They were taking me down there, and then I heard a shot, and the guy that was marching me down said, that's probably your friend. He didn't cooperate, and that's the last of him. So they brought me into this room, and there was an officer sitting there, and he had a big machine pistol on the table. And he as much as told me that my friend didn't cooperate, so he is no more. So they started asking me a number of questions. And what they were interested in is why we moved from the north over into front of Seoul. They thought that we were planning a big push. And as far as I know, I don't know nothing, because they don't tell me. You know, I'm a ground soldier, a grunt that's in the front, and I'm lucky if I even know my commander's name. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, because they change. So they're asking me all these questions, who my commander was, and I remember that. So I told them who my commander was, although he's the one that used to be there. He left. I got a new commander, but I didn't know his name anyway. So as far as finding out anything from a foot soldier, you can't find out a whole hell of a lot, because he's on the front all the time, and what does he know? And they don't clear nothing with him to begin with. So, although on the way back up there, we passed some big guns. They call them Long Johns. And they asked me what position they were in. And I said, no, I don't know. I have no idea. I might have seen them, but just where they were sitting. As far as dimensions go, you know, land location, I wouldn't know. So, and they ask you a lot of questions that if you go to the library, you can find most of them. So they wanted to see if you were being honest with them. So I went through that session and got through it all right. And the guy that they say they shot, they didn't shoot him. That was a ploy. That was trying to scare you. So they kept marching us back. This was on the way back to the rear, so they kept marching us back. And finally we got to this one camp. They put us in a camp that other Chinese prisoners were there. They were their own men that were in jail. And there was Koreans there, and there's Koreans and Chinese and everything there. And according to the Geneva Convention, you're not supposed to do that, but they did. We were in this camp. And one thing I noticed about it, the cells, they had about 2 inches of dust on the floor, and if you stepped quickly, you would bring the dust right up, so you had to go very slowly to keep the dust down. So I think that was another one of their ways of keeping the prisoners from making any abrupt moves. And they let us out in the courtyard there, and they fed us. They'd sit down the rice and whatever else they had. Yeah, I know the first time they set it down there, and the Koreans and the Chinese, they rushed to the pail and got whatever, you know, the food, and they gave us cups. So we went to the pail and scooped us out some rice. But how you got it in your mouth, and you had no spoons, no nothing. So eventually they said that there were little trees growing there, and they said, you gotta take the tree and make chopsticks out of them, like, and scoop it into you. So we didn't get a whole hell of a lot of food that day. But the next day, they put the food out there and they held back the other prisoners and let us eat first. And then when we had the option of getting seconds before those guys. So that wasn't, but even though you're not getting enough food. So I was kind of wondering why these other guys were prisoners. So I started asking them questions the best I could. And apparently I was asking them too many questions, and the next morning about 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, they come and took us out of that camp. Just marched us the heck out. And they put us in a bunker. Well, it wasn't too far from there, so that turned out to be a labor camp. So the 5 of us were in this bunker, and as time went on, the census got bigger, and toward the end there was 60 of us there, and we were carrying logs from the mountains that the Koreans chopped down, and we were bringing the logs down into that area, and they were making a rest camp for their soldiers, R&R camp. So we were under forced labor, you might call it. And of course they asked the men who they wanted to be their representative. The men I was with said they wanted me as a representative. So I was the men's representative. So when they came and they wanted us to go on these work details, they'd ask me, tell me what they wanted, and I had to tell the men. And if they had any trouble about not enough to eat, clothes weren't right, or this and that, I'd go and tell them. Didn't do much good, but that was my job. So over the time, there was more men got there, and when the men doubled, we started out with 5. When it got to be 10, 12, they had another vote of who would be the leader. And to my demise, I became the leader every time. They voted me as the leader. I don't want to be the leader, but they voted me as the leader. And then after a while, we got to have so many that they had to have an assistant leader. So they voted a guy named George Empson, and he was from England, and he was the assistant leader. And there came a time when they were trying to brainwash us, and these interpreters were well-educated people from the United States, and they'd been over there 10, 15 years studying our country. So consequently, they knew more about the United States than any of us did, because they were well-traveled and well-schooled. So one day they gave me a book, or 2 books, to read. It was communist books. It was communism, and they want us to read that, and then they wanted me to have the men write a book report. They were going to give us, when we finished the books, pencil and paper and you could write a story on what you read. Well, I informed him that these guys couldn't write. And seeing as they were in this country a long time, they say everybody can write United States. I was giving them the wrong information. So I had to think fast. I said, yeah, I says, everybody writes. I said, but, I says, everybody got different kind of handwriting. I says, you may not understand the writing, the handwriting. I says, so, I says, why don't we just interview them and ask questions on it? That would be much easier than writing. It would be better for us. So they went along with that idea. So this fellow George Empson, he liked to read. So, and all of us guys, we don't want to read those books. But he read them anyway. He read them, and then we got around them, and he gave us the highlights. And then when they came back and they said, did you read the books? And I said, yeah. And they went and interviewed us on what we read. So that worked out pretty good until they got my friend Custage, and he was captured with me. They asked him if he read the book, and he said he didn't, and he hated the communists because he'd come from Yugoslavia and Marshal Tito was the boss over there. So he said he didn't read the books, so it didn't bother him too much about not reading the books, but they bothered me because I told him that he read the books. Everybody read the book. So I said I seen him with the book in his hand, so I can't really tell what his eyes is doing. I thought he read the book, so, and they're pounding on me about it. And I said, you know, I don't want this job. And they says, you want to go in jail? And I thought for a minute, and I says, I wonder where I am now. But I don't know. I thought I knew better to ask them that, because when they said jail, it put me in the mind of down by where their kitchen was a couple of cages where they kept the pilots from planes they shot down there. And the crew members were kept in a separate area, but not in the cages. The pilots where the officers were. So they as much as threatened me with one of those. So he pretty near got me put in one of them cages. So I stayed as the leader until the winter came. And when the winter came, it was around Christmas Eve. They come out to bring us to the regular prison camp. And that was up by the Yellow River. I think that this labor camp was in Pyongyang, which isn't, it's about halfway between South Korea and the Yellow River. So Christmas Eve they come over with 2 trucks, and they're going to ship us back to the regular prison camp. And they put us on the trucks and tied our hands behind us on the racks. And we went to the prison camp. Well, they started out for the prison camp. They figured that Christmas Eve we'd have no planes out there, and so they could get by easier. So, and it was the roads were terrible, snow and everything else. So the truck that was in front of us tipped over on the road, and a couple of the men got pinned between the rack and the ground. What really saved them was there was 2 50-gallon drums of fuel oil at each corner of the back of the truck, and the weight of the back of that truck rested on them barrels. And these trucks didn't weigh too much anyway. They were like Russian trucks. So our truck come up and we stopped and they let us all off the truck and we got out there and all of us together grabbed the rack and picked the truck back up on its wheels. And there's a couple guys we got out from under there. And nobody got really hurt bad, except one of the interpreters got hurt bad because that guy got caught between the barrel and the ground. So that guy really got hurt. And a couple of them, like I say, a couple of guys got pinned back there. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, I met one of the fellas that was pinned there. He started telling me a story, and after so many years, you don't recognize him. He started telling me a story, and I said, "Geez, I'm one of the guys that helped pick the truck off you." And then we got talking, and we talked over old times. He was from Detroit, Michigan. And I go to a reunion of the Korean POWs once a year. And the camp that we were in was an isolation camp back by the Yellow River. And there was about 70, 80 guys there. And they were all supposed to be the bad apples. And these guys came from other camps. They made up this camp. And incidentally, when I came from the labor camp, they asked me if I had a brother that was in the service. And just before I got captured, my mother wrote me a letter and said that my brother joined the service. Now, she didn't say what service or anything. She just said he joined the service. So the Chinese is telling me that they got my brother in a prison camp in the back there. And I'm going back there, that's where they're bringing me. So when I got back to that camp, we met the guys and I said, "Where's this guy George Jacobs?" "Well, he's down in the camp." I said, "Well, how about getting him? I want to see this guy." Okay, so they got the guy, brought him up. Here he is. He says, "I understand you wanted to see me." I says, "Yeah." I said, I said, "And I'm happy to see you." He said, "Why are you happy to see me?" "I don't know you." I says, "Because you're not my brother." I said, "They told me that they had my brother, and his name is George Jacobs, and your name is George Jacobs, but you're not my brother." So I'm happy to see you. So, as a matter of fact, he lives in Australia. This guy is an Australian, and about 10, 15 years ago, my daughter was in Australia. I was in Australia too, but I couldn't find him. But my daughter found him and talked to him on the phone. So he's still in Australia. He's probably about 85, 88 years old right now. But and I never did see him after that. But had the same name my brother did. So that's how that worked. So anyway, we were in this camp for a while there, and that's where I got released from being a prisoner, right at this camp. And on the way, on that ride back in the trucks, when that truck tipped over, that truck stopped at what their so-called hospital and put a man on there, and he was in a gurney like, and they put him on there. And when the truck tipped over, it threw him out into a snowbank. And we grabbed him, and we had to put him in our truck then. But I noticed a pair of shoes there, boots. So I grabbed his boots and I says to the guy, "Hey, I got your boots." And he says, "Well, I'll never wear those boots again." He had one leg off already, and the other leg was rotten so bad you could smell it. And when you can smell flesh rotting in below zero weather, it's bad. So he says to me, "What size boots do you wear?" And I told him, he says, they'll fit you. He said, you can have them. I'll never use them again. Okay. So after we got that truck tipped over and everything, it was way out of line and everything. So we had to come back to the prison camp. Wasn't too far from there anyway. And they stopped and they dropped this guy off at that hospital again where he picked him up. And I'd never seen him again. But I had the boots. Well, a week later, they come in the camp with a couple more trucks. This was New Year's Eve, and they took us to the regular camp. And like I said, I had these boots with me. And the reason I remember them boots so good is when the peace talks were signed and they were getting us ready to let us come home, they would march us to a staging area. So I was at one of these staging areas. I was marching into camp, and another group was marching out, going to another staging area. As a matter of fact, they were going to the last staging area before getting released. And a fellow seen me there, and he says, hey, he says, the soldier, he says, the boots you got, he says, you're not going to be able to keep those, he says, because they take everything away that isn't their issue. So, and this is after the peace talks were signed, you know. So we're walking along, and I see a big hay pile where the Koreans piled the hay up, and then they'd come and take it away in a wagon like. So I took my boots and I put them underneath the hay pile. And went down into the camp, and they took us out and they searched us all and told us where we were asleep, and they checked all our belongings and did just what that fellow said, took everything away that wasn't their issue. And after they got done, they fell us out, so I hurried up, I run back to that pile. And just as I got there was an old Korean there. He was there with his wagon going to bring the pile to his barn or wherever the heck he was bringing it. And he found the boots. He just got his hand on the boots, and I reached over and grabbed the boots. Told him they were my boots. He said they were his boots. So we're having an argument there, but listen, I don't talk Korean and he don't talk English. So we're having a problem there. But eventually, he had his daughter with him. And I don't know how old she was, but she wasn't too old. In her teens, probably. Now, he wanted to give me his daughter for the boots. What would I do with that? So I says, no, I want the boots. So eventually, and I had to get out of there because if the Chinese ever seen me arguing with this Korean there, both of us would have been in trouble. So I sat down there and I took my sneakers off, their issue. And I gave him the sneakers and he gave me the boots. And I had to put the boots on. So I went back down to the camp. Next morning they fell us all out again. They're going to inspect us again. So all these men are there with sneakers on. I'm the only guy with a pair of black shiny boots. And they went wild. They brought me over to the commandant of the camp and asked me how come I had them boots. How come they didn't find them the day before? Well, I told them I don't know. So they threatened to send me to China. And it was only a day or two that I was supposed to come back, you know. So I got pretty scared there. They wanted to send me to China. So they let me run around that camp for a couple of days with no boots. No, they marched me over to a hut and opened the door and just throw them in there. Well, I looked in there and there was a pile of boots, all kinds of boots. And I had to throw them in there. But they didn't give me no footwear. So for a couple of days I was around there barefooted, thinking that, hey, it's a possibility they're going to send me to China. But the day before we got repatriated back to home, they gave me a pair of sneakers, and I was fortunate enough to get repatriated at Peace Bridge. So that's about my story there. There's a number of things that happened that we had a lot of fellows that died out there, especially in the labor camp. We had dysentery bad, and they had no medicine for it. And guys got dysentery real bad. They'd take them out and say they're going to bring them to the hospital, but that's the last we'd ever see them. And I had guys that had dysentery. That was one day, for an example, I had this guy, Romero, his name was. He was from Colorado. He was captured in that machine gun nest that was with me. And he had dysentery bad. And we were out in this field eating the dinner they served, and they were like rice, things made out of rice anyway, buns like made out of rice flour, they call it. So he was eating this, and then all of a sudden he had to go to the bathroom. And so what he does is he takes that thing and in disgust, he throws it. And it lands right in where somebody else had gone to the bathroom. And the guard seen it. And he come over there, and he wanted that guy to pick that up and eat it. Although he was going to the bathroom at this time. So the guards were hollering like, so I had to go to that. I went and wiped it off as well I could, and then I had to eat it. But things like that happened quite frequently there. The guards themselves weren't too nice a lot of times. So, but we made it anyway. Some of us did. A lot of us didn't.
So what was it like when you came home?
Well, it was very hard to get accustomed to being home again. I was gone for nearly 3 years, and you're like in isolation. Things have happened. And then I belonged to the Purple Heart organization. This is what got me one day, more so than anything else. I went to a dinner, Purple Heart dinner. They call it the George Washington's a dinner. We have one every year, George Washington's time, and we honor a veteran. So I was there, and this one guy that was in the Marines, he was a sergeant major or whatever, an old timer that was at that party there, and they told him that I had been a prisoner, and he comes to me and he says, and how do you become a prisoner? He said, what do you do, go out there and just run out there and raise your hands and say, I give up, you know, and something like that. And it really irked me, and he's lucky I didn't take a punch at him, but I didn't. But it's hard to get used to things like that. When I first went there, on the front, I vowed to myself that I would never be taken a prisoner, and I think most people do that, but it just happens. You can't prevent it. I mean, sometimes you could, but at this particular time, it just didn't happen that way. So it's not easy to become a prisoner. And the worst thing about being a prisoner is that you lose your freedom. And the biggest thing is the flag. When you see the flag and you're under the flag, you know you have the freedom. And that's what I did over there one day. They were questioning me about, this commissar, he was questioning me, and so, and telling me, trying to brainwash me. So I kind of made him believe that maybe I was going his direction. Although you can't do it too easy, you've got to really put the act on. You've got to make him believe it's real hard. So we're doing this, and he'd give us a cigarette. There was 4 of us there, and 5 of us, and he'd give us each a cigarette. And we ate pretty good, considering where we were. But one day he got me so ticked off that I says, one of these days, I says, you're going to see the men coming over that hill, I says, and the United States of America flag coming over there. I says, they're going to wipe all you birds out. And hey, I'm only about 18, 19 years old, and this guy is, I bet he was in his 50s. And he started crying. And that kind of scared me. And he went out to bunker, and in come one of the guards. And in the little English he might have known, he wondered what we did to make the guy cry, you know. Well, we didn't get no more cigarettes after that. The food wasn't quite that good, but they tried that stuff.
Were there occasions when you were visited by the Red Cross?
No, I never seen a Red Cross in my life over there. We never got nothing from the Red Cross or anybody else. Chinese would not allow anything coming to us. If it did get shipped over, they used it, because we never seen nothing. Nobody ever seen anything from the Red Cross. The only thing I see over there once in a while was a Russian. He come from Russia, and I could tell by the uniform that he was a Russian. He'd come in on when they were interrogating us, and he'd listen.
What was it like from the time you were released until you were separated? What did you go through?
We separated from the service.
From the Marines?
Well, when I got released, you see, I was supposed to come home and get discharged the day I got captured. Well, when I come home, they wouldn't let me out. They shipped me over for 6 months for medical reasons, and of course they tried to get me to stay in as a recruiting officer, but I didn't want to stay in. So, but it was very hard to get accustomed to getting into everyday things again after being a prisoner. And I really feel that they had, our government had people that were watching us, because one day I was still in the service and they wanted me to go to Washington, D.C. to testify in behalf of this Colonel Schwabel, his name was, and he was a flight commander, fighter planes, and he went over and he got shot down, and I see him when he got shot down. I see him bail out, and they brought him in his camp right where we were, and they really treated him bad. They punched him with the bayonet, and they asked him all kinds of questions and all that. And I remember one question they asked him how he got down there. And they like to question these pilots to say they got shot down, but this guy said that he shifted the machine and the plane in reverse and stripped the gears, and he came down. And they weren't very happy about that answer. And they were, you know, they walked him down the path in front of us, but we couldn't even look at him. And they'd hit him, punch him with the bayonet every once in a while. Well, they claimed that he said that we used germ warfare. I don't know whether he did or not, but I know that I didn't hear him say we had germ warfare. So we had to go down to Washington, D.C. to testify to people that seen him. Seeing that I was still in the service, I had to go down there. Well, on the way down, I was on a train, and a guy came in there, and he was in the Marines, and he sat down with me. He said, "Anybody sitting with you?" And I said, "No." He said, "Can I sit down with you?" He said, "Go ahead." And he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going down to Washington to report on this guy to germ warfare." And I told him the story. And he said, "You want a drink?" He said, "We'll go to." I said, "No, I don't drink." So he threw his hat down there. And he hadn't got a drink. And in the hat it says, "Don't talk to anyone." There was a message in there. So he come back, I don't say no more. Because, well, first of all, he said he was just out of boot camp, but after I looked at him again, I know darn well his dress greens looked like they'd been pressed 100 times, so they weren't new. So I said that they put a plant there to see if I was talking. And then when I got to Grand Central, same thing. I went on a train there, and I'm hanging on a thing there, and I bumped the guy, and the guy turned around and, "Hey, Marine," he said, "Where are you from?" And I told, "Oh," he said, "I know a guy there," and he knew the guy, the same guy I did, and he's telling me about him and asked me where I'm going, or I wouldn't tell him. But they were following me, and they'd done that for a while, so they make me pretty paranoid. So.
Okay, well, I know we could talk for many more minutes, but we thank you very much for your
You're welcome.
service to the United States as well as for the time you just spent with us.
You're welcome.
That's quite